You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
We need a bloopers reel. Do you think our listeners would like a bloopers reel?
Yeah, so Emily, if you want to edit in this part, you can tell listeners that, hi, Will and Jen are using a new platform today, and we neither one know how to use it, and Emily's not here to help us, and so
And Emily, you should say we don't want to.
word?
We're old and we don't wanna.
Floundering. I'm floundering along in this moment. So we'll get started with the episode coming up Monday. Okay, here we go. Hi, Principal Matters listeners. This is Will Parker, along with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, back from Monday Matters. Oh man, Jen, it's September. And for any listeners who want to hear our flagship shows, tune in on Wednesdays. But this is where you and I just get to catch up and give some current up-to-dates to listeners, but also talk about some of the things we're currently learning as well. Interviews with our guests can be heard on Wednesdays. We're going to a home football game tonight because it's that time of the year. And I don't know how you're feeling without.
I don't. I had 4 years of football Friday nights as a mom, but I'll tell you what, tonight is a big night in my community. Two of our high schools are playing one another. We expect a crowd of about 5,000, and it's been a week. You know, high schoolers when there's a rivalry. So I'm kind of looking forward to 10 p.m. when it's all over.
I bet you are. Well, Jen, I've been enjoying introducing listeners to your new book, Trusted, Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and the Secret to Successful Schools by Dr. Jen Schwanke. And I actually have my copy in hand today. I've been using your advanced copy for a long time, but there it is. And it's just made me so happy to have it with me. I wanted to talk to you today about your chapter on students. And I actually would like to break this into two parts, one this week and one next, because this is, of all of the people that you write this book about, this may be the most important because This is what it's all about, how we take care of our kids. So take us there, because I want to focus this week on some trust killers that leaders should keep in mind, things we should be avoiding when it comes to the way that we build trust with students.
So yeah, these trust killers are never done intentionally, right? But we sometimes do them in the name of something else, and it can break trust with students. I referenced this big football game, and I know if I had the principal of one of the schools with me right now, he would say he had a very, very bad week. And part of why he had a bad week is he had worked with the students about behavior leading up to the game, and some of them they made some poor choices. And he feels betrayed. He feels, upset because he felt he could trust them. And, there are other times where it's the shoe's on the other foot, right? Where students feel like they can, should, would, want to trust their principal, and they see some behaviors where that doesn't happen. So let's talk about some of those, right? One of them that I think is a huge one with students is public embarrassment. No one likes to be called out, shamed, or humiliated. And when principals do that, it's an immediate trust breaker. And, I've done that before, and I'm not proud of it. But as a principal, in the lunchroom looking out at 300 kids, and there's one student acting a fool, and I'm like, I say their name and I say, get over here. And, there might be a time and place for that. But, when students when they stand out or they stand alone or they suffer judgment, those kind of embarrassment feelings can be carried with them for years. And so, there's a reason that, remember the lawsuit, Will, where trade and grade was deemed to be unconstitutional? That's why, because students don't want their grades to be shouted out, trade and grade, and then read the other student's grade out loud. So that's one, is public embarrassment.
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me of a story, and I'll just tell it as a bad moment in my own history. I was a school administrator. I was at a football game, just like the football games tonight are going to be happening. I was watching students doing supervision. A student whom I trusted came up to me and was like, Mr. Parker, there's a whole row of boys up there that are smoking vapes, and it's just so embarrassing. And I know they think nobody sees it, but everybody sees it. And so I said thank you. And after the student left, because I didn't want to embarrass her, I waited, and then I walked up and walked down that row of boys, and I could see them all,
Mhm.
that look that they have in their face when the principal was coming. And of course they all had their hands,
Right.
hidden, and you couldn't see anything. So I just walked down the row and looked at them. When I got to the last boy, I reached down, he had his hat bill pulled over his eyes. And so I reached down and lifted his hat bill and looked at him and said to all him and all of them, hey, listen, I haven't seen you do anything wrong, but if there's anything happening up here and I see you, you're going to be leaving this game and we'll be talking about consequences. I walked away from that situation, forgot all about it, came back into school. And on that following day that I returned to school, my SRO was waiting. And he said, well, I hate to have this conversation with you first thing in the morning, but I had a parent that that filed a charge on you for assault on his son at the football game. And so, long story short, no charges ever got filed. I mean, nothing ever happened because of it. But when I rewound that whole situation and had to rebuild trust with that student,
Yeah,
it was all
that's right.
based on embarrassment. He was embarrassed. He went and complained to his father,
Yep.
and his father just went over the edge in terms of his response to it. So, Jen, one of the things you say early in this chapter is imagine everything you're saying and doing being recorded. And how would you want to behave in that situation? Of course, I thought I was behaving like I would
Right.
want it to be recorded. But even in that situation, Will learned a quick lesson. I don't
That's
touch
right.
the bills of kids' hats.
Right. That's
I
right.
just don't. Yeah, I just don't. So you're right. So, but the crux of that, I think, was his embarrassment
Right.
in front of his friends. And so, and those are things
That's
you're going to have
exactly
to
right. I think
consider.
embarrassment is a huge driver for student behavior and response. And we just need to keep that in mind. To take that analogy one step further, my husband is an athletic director and he always tells his coaches never say or do anything in front of or with a child that you wouldn't do with their parent standing right there. So that's really good.
That's right.
Another one that I think is a real trigger for students is favoritism. Students can sniff this out of the air. And the story that I tell in the book is of my nieces, and they actually went to school in Ecuador when this story happened. But there was a principal, and my nieces told me this, and I didn't even believe them. I thought, oh, you're being dramatic. But they had a principal who it seemed to want to be with the popular girls, right? Like relive her own teenage years. So she would gravitate to the popular kids and kind of dismiss or be really hard on the kids that were not perceived as popular. And at the time, I was like, oh, come on. Well, then I saw it when I went to visit. I actually saw it. And this staff member seemed to want to be a teenage girl again. And so, if you're outside of that favoritism circle, it can be really difficult, if not impossible, to build that trust. I think principals struggle with this just by the nature of student leaders. So if you've got a leader group, they can become your favorites. And that's okay. It's okay to have favorites. It's not okay, though, to treat students who are not in that circle differently, be harder on them, that kind of thing. So that's a very difficult needle to thread, but something to keep in mind.
I've had several friends create
Right.
principal advisory committees. And what I love about the way I've seen them doing it, Jen, is they're purposefully asking students into those committees and they're
Right.
looking for variety and I've heard some of them say,
That's
I
right.
don't want the same kind of kid on my leadership team. I want those groups to represent all of my students. And so,
That's
because
right.
man, kids can sniff it out. If you're only
That's
working
right.
with one kind of
Yep,
kid,
that's right.
they know it.
The other one now, another one is lack of due process. And we all know because of the Supreme Court's 1975 decision on Goss versus Lopez, we know that every kid gets due process. But since we're being truthful, there were times when I was a principal where I had just had enough. And I remember one student, he and I have stayed in touch. We're in a great place now. But this kid, he was a middle schooler, and he was always in trouble. And I remember a couple of times he'd get sent to the office. I would hear what happened and I would say, Brandon, I do not want to hear from you. I do. And he'd say, can I please just tell you what happened? I'd be like, absolutely not. I am not interested in what you think happened. Well, that's probably not a good idea. I could have said, I'm going to need a minute. We will talk in a minute. But right now, I'm not ready to hear it right now. Give me 5 minutes. I'm going to go get a drink of water. I'll be right back. Because due process, whether formal or informal, it's really, really important for students to feel like they're heard. Right.
No comment needed there, Jen. Just like when you think that you don't, when you can skirt around the
That's right.
process, it will bite you every time. And
That's right. That's
so
right.
yeah,
Another trust
keep
killer
going.
that I see so often is ambiguous or arbitrary decisions. Students hate that, right? They it makes the
Mhm.
trust they have very, very shaky. Kids need to know, students need to know why things happen as they do. Why is the schedule arranged as it is? Why do we have to be on time? Why are there consequences for this behavior that we don't think is fine? Or excuse me, that we think is fine? Why can't we say or do certain things? Students need to know why. And I know that question is annoying. Sometimes the answer, why do I have to learn algebra? Just because you have to learn algebra. Sometimes the answer is one that students still think is arbitrary. But if you have policies and protocols and practices that are linked to fairness and systems, like you and I have talked about ad nauseum, students value that. That's a high value for them, is reasons for why.
Jen, and I know that you already believe this, but everything that you're saying is the same sentiment
Right.
that works in good classrooms, which is, goodness gracious, don't say things you
Right.
can't enforce. Don't randomly choose new rules that can't be consistently implemented over all people, and do yourself the favor and don't just decide on a whim
Hmm.
you're going to create a new rule, because when you do, you will suffer the consequence of not being able to
That's right.
enforce it consistently. And
Yep.
so, yeah, love
Another
this.
one
Keep
is
going.
exclusivity. And I could talk about this for 5 days, I swear. Many schools, many teachers want to have, student of the month, superstar shamrock, tiger of the week, whatever. And I do think there's value in that. I do not want to be misunderstood here. Here's my problem though, is when we put these programs in place and the exact same students get it year after year after year. I think of
Hmm.
this as the Anna effect. I'm talking about one student, and her mother was very, very involved in the PTO. Wonderful family, amazing, right? Anna got Student of the Month in September in kindergarten, in first grade, in second grade, in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. It was, she was a wonderful child. Her mother was amazing. I'm dear friends with her still. But sometimes this idea of let's reward the exact same profile of a student over and over and over, that's beyond everybody gets a trophy, which by the way I would argue everybody deserves a trophy. But these awards tend to honor certain types, I'm using air quotes there: the scholars, the athletes, the students to whom school comes naturally. So I would just point out that for every 20 or 30 students that you might honor throughout a year, there might be 70, 170, 500 students who are like, of course. Of course it's not me. And all of those kids have a parent who have never been invited in for the donuts that come with Student of the Month. So I I have my own thoughts about how this could be done better, but I just think it's worth principals thinking about. If you're honoring the same type over and over with these awards, it just might be time to think about it and talk about it.
No, I love that. And I know that when we get to the second half of this chapter, we'll talk about
Right.
pillars, which are the positive sides of all these. But I'll just say really quickly that I love it when I see schools create opportunities for teachers to recognize kids in a variety of ways. For instance, I've seen schools, maybe they sometimes put kids in houses, or they put kids in, they create kindness opportunities for refer students when they do good things. And so suddenly, when you can encourage teachers to be looking for all kids doing good things, a kid helps tutor another kid. A kid opens the door for a teacher when their hands are full. A kid helps clear off the cafeteria
Right.
table after someone left their trash. So the list goes on and on. There are so many
That's
other
right.
ways we can be acknowledging great behavior of students. And so by only focusing
Yep.
on an exclusive few,
That's
man, we're
right.
really leaving out
That's
the
right.
majority of our
Okay, just
kids.
two more. All right, ready? The next one
Okay.
is
Yep.
disrespect. And this, I thought of this one because, again, something that I did. This is like all of Jen's skeletons in the closet coming out. But this was when I was at the middle school, and a group of students asked me, they left a note in my office or something, and they said, we want to start a newspaper. And I was busy and I wasn't interested. I was like, I can't even think about this. And I ignored them. I completely ignored them. Well, about, I don't know, a few weeks later, they came to school. It was two girls, and they had, by golly, started their newspaper. And they had done some feature stories and some reporting and some recipes, I think, and some pictures that they put in there, and they photocopied, and then they cut it all out and they lay it out, like it was an old-fashioned newspaper on spiral-bound notebook paper, and they stapled it together, and they were distributing it. And they got made fun of. They got mocked. Students threw it away, stepped on it. I think they had made, 30 or 40 copies, painstaking work, hard work that they put together, and they were humiliated. And all I had to do, Will, was A, answer them. That's it. Or B, I could have called them in and I could have said, let's think about this. Talk to me about it. And then I would have seen the passion they had for the project. And then maybe I could have gone to their English teacher and said, is there any project-based learning that you have, any sort of something where this passion can be channeled into a project where we can use some school resources, even if it was just a ream of paper, right? And then they could create a product with the support of professionals that would know how to do it. So that's a regret of mine. I can still see this newspaper, and I could still see their faces when they realized it wasn't a hit. So I did not respect their passion, their energy, and their commitment. I ignored them. And that, it was worse, honestly, than if I had just said no to them.
What I appreciate about that story, Jen, is that it is so easy, and I'm speaking to listeners right now. It is so easy in the busyness of our work to forget the freshness of the experience for our students. And so this may be the umpteenth child that's come to you today with something. And for you, it may be like rinse and repeat conversations. But for that child, that's going to be one of the most novel experiences of their day, talking to you and going home and saying, I spoke to my principal, or I spoke to my assistant principal, or I spoke to fill in the blank. And so the question we have to just keep asking ourselves is, what do I want that experience to be like for them? And so you're right, Jen, that whole, if it's a moment of disrespect or they feel that in any way at all, that's the story they're going to go home with.
That's right. So I call this overstepping. And this is where principals break trust by trying to control situations that aren't theirs to control. A few years ago, gosh, it might even be as many as 10 years ago now, there were some students that organized nationwide a walkout to protest gun violence. And two schools in a state near mine responded to this in very, very different ways. One principal got the kids together, talked about it, said, okay, what are some of the things that you're thinking about? What is upsetting you? What are some contrary opinions? What are some other people thinking? And he really worked with them and created a space for critical thinking, created a space for organization and the executive planning of an event. And it went beautifully. The walkout turned out to be calm, respectful, and honestly effective because it started some conversations within the community that were very powerful. A principal in the next county did the opposite. This principal shut it down. We're not doing this. It's against our policy, which, by the way, it was not. And I don't want to hear anything about it. I don't want anybody to talk about it, etc. Well, what happened is it became an underground protest, which is what students do, right? And so they planned it. They called reporters. They called the ACLU. It became a situation where the principal shut down something that was not in the principal's purview to shut down. It was just it was a way that this principal, in trying to keep order and trying to not create an event, did and broke trust with students in the process.
Oh my gosh, Jen, my brain is just rewinding to so many situations that I've encountered either personally or with others. And so let's pause for a second as we wrap up today's Monday Matters, because listeners, I want you to tune in next week because I'm going to ask Jen to unpack the pillars of how we build trust with students. But I just think it's so important sometimes to take a step back from our own behaviors and ask, as I'm stepping into the situation, am I creating embarrassment for a student, or am I honoring them in the way I'm going to talk to them? Am I showing favoritism, or am I making sure that every student knows that they're important to me? Am I ignoring a
Right.
lack of due process? Am I being ambiguous or arbitrary? Or am I being exclusive? Or am I just blatantly showing disrespect for students or overstepping my own boundaries? Man, Jen, I've said this in other settings. In fact, I was with a group of leaders earlier this week, and I said, and I think I've started saying this to you, you need
Right.
wisdom. To be a leader, there's so
Right.
many things we can do wrong. And so I just want to encourage listeners, um, even as you listen to those things and you're checking off your own behaviors, be encouraged, give yourself grace. But also, when you see those warning signs, then you hear those
Right.
cautions, pay attention, because we certainly don't want to be stepping into situations where
That's
we're
right.
deteriorating the trust
That's right.
that we have
And
with kids.
most things are reparable, right? You can fix a lot of ways that you, and this is a great segue into next week, because I do want people to tune in to hear the pillars, the positive part of it. If you have misstepped, so like that example with the newspaper, all I needed to do is go to those kids and say, you know what, I blew it. Let's do this. Let's talk about a newspaper. Let's talk about how our copy machine and our ream of paper might help you. I mean, being a little bit metaphorical here, but usually if we make a misstep and break some trust, we can get it back. And that's what we'll talk about next week.
I love it. Well, Principal Matters listeners, if you haven't already checked out Jen's new book, Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and the Secret to Successful Schools, you better do it. Because it's just such a great book. And Jen, I saw also that you're going to be a part of an upcoming instructional
Oh
leaders
yeah, I've got a
summit with
lot going on,
ASCD.
Will.
You ready to share any
I'm
details on that? Yeah.
so much incredible fun things going on. Yeah. So ASCD is hosting a Chief Instructional Leader Summit in January in San Diego. So I'll be there. I will also be in Oregon in October at the Wide Open Spaces Conference working with their principals, their rural principals. And then I'll be in Indiana with the assistant principals in Indiana in November. So busy times. And what about you? Are you traveling?
It makes me happy. Well, by the time this comes out, I'll be getting ready for a conference in Little Rock, Arkansas with Apogee and School CEO on how to better message and communicate with our parents. And then in October, I'm heading up to New York to the Lake Placid area with Sainies, and they've asked me to come up and present on my new book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? So I'd love to connect with leaders in either one of those places too, Jen. And so obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're not already receiving our newsletter from the podcast, you can sign up for it, or you can sign up for Jen's
Oh my gosh, yes,
newsletter. Jen,
my
how
new
can they do that?
newsletter. It's so fun. It's Principal Problems with Dr. Jen. And so go to my website to sign up. Just click on newsletter, and it's easy peasy. Just enter your email address.
Well, until next time, Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.